Okay, so we've completed the front part of our twist pouch, and now we're going to look at the stabilisers that we could use. Now, I'm going to use foam, but I'm going to use a headliner foam for mine. Headliner foam is about 2 millimeters thick. You can scrunch it up in your hand. It's actually used in car manufacture to soundproof and in the top of the cars and stuff like that. Now I find that this is enough for a pouch of this size. It gives enough structure without making it really difficult to turn. You can also buy bag making foam, so foam that's designed specifically for the purpose. This is Stabiliser, made by Violin. There are several other different makes available in the UK. Bosal. You can also buy things like Biani Soft and Stable, which is actually an American product, but it's available on Amazon, and they're very similar, very similar. Some are fusible, some are non-fusible. I prefer non-fusible for everything because fusible things tend to wrinkle. But you can see when I put one against the other, this is the stuff that's designed for bag making, and this is the stuff that goes inside of car manufacturing, how different the thickness is. This is about 5 millimeters thick, and whilst it's easy to sew through, it can be a challenge to get underneath your presser foot. And if you haven't got a really big swanky machine, then I would avoid this at all costs. And this little pouch doesn't need something as strong as this. Now, if you're not confident about sewing through foam, then you can use fusible fleece. On your pattern piece, there's a dotted line around the outside, just round on the inside on the lining panel, and you would cut your fusible fleece on that line and adhere it to the wrong side of your lining fabric. Now, you would have already put your woven fusible interfacing, or if you haven't got woven fusible interfacing, a lightweight non-woven onto your fabric, and then you're going to place your fusible fleece onto this fabric so that there'll be a gap around all of the edges, which will mean that you don't have too much thickness to sew through. So for those of you that are really new bag makers who are a little bit concerned about, will my machine manage, that's your better option. If you've used something like denim on the outside, as I have, you could actually get away probably with neither of these options. If you've used a sort of a curtain weight or upholstery weight fabric, then you could possibly get away with neither. I like to have a bit of structure in my bags, and I know that my machine can manage, so I'm going to use the headliner foam. And I'm going to show you how, this is not fusible, so I'm going to show you how I will attach my headliner to my front panel and my back panel. So headliner has two sides. One side has a sort of a nylon mesh on it, and the other side is kind of felty. It's soft and yeah, soft and felty. Reminds me a little bit of fuzzy felt, for those of you ladies that are of a certain age like I am. When you were a kid and you had fuzzy felt, those of you that are very young, Google fuzzy felt. Great fun. I don't even think it's made anymore. I like to put my fabric onto this felted side because it does tend to hold it in place because it's felted. It sort of sticks to it almost. Now, you can use, if you prefer, you can use a bit of spray adhesive underneath. So a bit of 505 spray or spray and stay, depends what manufacturer you prefer to use. My favourite option for attaching this is to sew baste it in place. Now, I do not sew baste the top edge. I simply sew baste down both sides and along the bottom, not into those little cutouts. So I'm just going to do that. Let me just turn the camera around slightly so you can see. Just move you along a bit. That's the one. Now, sew basting will need to be done within the seam allowance because we actually are going to remove those basting stitches after we've constructed. It's just to kind of hold the foam in place while we're actually constructing the bag. So I'm going to sew baste at 1/8 of an inch, so within the seam allowance. And I'm using the longest stitch that I have on my machine, which for me is a 6. I'm not back stitching at the beginning and the end because I want to make it easy enough to remove my stitching. It's just to hold the foam in place, and you can see there as a line of stitching. And I'm going to do exactly the same on both of the sides, just to attach the foam. To the main panels. And the same on this side. And I don't do the top because I find that sometimes it will distort things if I do the top. So I just find it's easier not to, and it's never impeded my construction not having the top bit basted. Now sometimes when you stitch your foam on, because you're compressing the foam, you'll get a little bit that kind of shows on the edges there, which is just where you've basically compressed the foam down. Trim it off, because you don't actually need that extra. It's only a fraction of an inch, but it's enough to throw off your seam allowances sometimes. So I just trim off that little bit of extra foam that's showing where I've basted. Even though I cut my foam exactly to the right size, as soon as you stitch on it, you compress it and it sort of splays out slightly. You may not find it happens, but for me it always does, and it's just a fraction, but it's just enough to annoy me. So I'm just going to trim those bits off. So that's my front panel completed, and you'll see this is a slightly different one to the one that I was doing. This one's got 9 strips, and I've put my strips right next door to each other, so I haven't left that 1/8 of an inch. So it's exactly the same as the one I made previously. It's just got 9 panels because I wanted the rainbow. I'm going to get my back panel, and I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm just going to baste my foam in place. If you're using fusible fleece, you don't need to baste it. You just fuse it using your iron, following the manufacturer's instructions. Fusible fleece, Vilene H640, Vilene H630, which I think one is a high loft and a low loft, and one is a high loft, which means one's got a bit more puffiness to it than the other. Thermolam, which I think is a low loft fleece. All of these are available from most fabric shops, Amazon. Have a look in our main group for the suppliers post, where there's lots of suppliers selling all of these products. Your local fabric shop will probably have fusible fleece, because it's not really a specialist product. It's something that's used in a lot of different disciplines. Headliner is available from various different places also. I buy mine from eBay, from a place in Yorkshire, and it is of variable quality, it has to be said, but it is only about 2 millimeters thick, and I like it for little pouches. It works, it's enough. It's also very easy to sew with, so if you don't have a big swanky industrial machine, blah blah blah, you can easily use that. So there we go, I've basted my foam onto my exterior back panel and to my front panel. Now, while I've got you here regarding these 2 panels, if you wanted to make your back panel in the same way as you did your front panel, so you have the 3 pieces, you can do, which means that you don't necessarily have to put the twisty bits on, but it means you'll get those lines of stitching, so the back will match the front. For me, I'm not bothered one way or the other. The only thing you might find if you do that is that when you're stitching over those seams that you've made, when you're sewing the sides of your pouch up, you've given yourself a bit of extra thickness in those places. So that's why I did a plain back, because I wanted to try and keep the layers to a minimum for those of you that are new to bag making and perhaps using mid-range sewing machines rather than sort of swanky or singing or dancing versions, because not all machines are made equal, and some machines will be less happy about thickness and bulk than others. So I wanted to make this accessible for everybody, so everybody can actually make it. So there we go, there's my front and my back panel with foam. As I say, if you're going to use fusible fleece, then both of your lining panels, position your fusible fleece in the center, turn your fabric over and press from the top side. Do not press on the fleece, because if you do, you'll just end up with a lot of muck on your iron, and you will not thank me for that. So fusible fleece, which would come, it would sit 3/8 of an inch in from all of the sides on this piece, so it means you'll be reducing the bulk in any of the seams. hugely. So if you're really new and really not very confident, then Fusible fleece is definitely the way forwards. So I will come back to you and we'll look at installing our zipper. Now I know this is the bit that will scare a lot of people because zippers do scare people. Promise you it's not as difficult as it sounds.